Oh boy, you guys. I just did like a 15-minute dissertation on one of the questions somebody asked for my direct message, and then my phone just like shut off. It didn't shut off, but it just exited out of the camera, and then that was that. So I'm very disheartened right now, but I am going to redo the answer to that question. However, I'm only going to answer that question, and I'm going to sort of stockpile all other questions, and I'm going to address them over time. So if I don't get to yours, I'm sorry, and I owe Maria this. I owe Maria this answer because she's been asking for a couple of months. So hopefully my phone doesn't shit the bed. If it does, I'll try it again. Okay, here goes. So the question really was about what changes for a woman's training when she ages. I think this needs to be drilled down more specifically. And so what I'd like to do is basically just use Maria as an avatar, but age her 25 years. Not sure how she'll think about that. But I want it to be specific to her because the answer to that question depends largely, of course, on the person themselves. So Maria is an athlete, so she doesn't just work out for living long and prospering. She works out to perform. So this would be in the context of an athlete. What happens for an athlete, a female athlete, in terms of considerations when she gets older? And of course, there are changes that need to happen. So I think the main consideration is menopause. Why? Because there's a cascade of hormonal things that stop basically, and this is highly important. It's a huge sort of milestone, and there's consequences for that. And so of course I'm not a doctor, so I can't get too much into it because my knowledge is limited. But what we do know, and I just took a course on this, so I do know a little bit, but what we know is menopause ceases the production of estrogen, the main sex hormone for women. And what that actually does, it can result in a loss of bone density and a loss of muscle strength and a loss of muscle tissue, basically. So estrogen, the stopping of it can eliminate muscle cells, which is rather scary, but it's okay because you can stay on top of it. Best thing to do is to make sure that you start, before that comes, and then, 5 years later, you're like, oh boy, I really should be lifting weights. That's one of the biggest recommendations for older women is to do strength training, and this is why, because you can really you're at a much higher risk of injury because of the lack of bone density there. So if we know that this hormonal shift in somebody's lifetime is going to cause issues with muscle building and bone density, then I think that a person's priorities should shift to more strength training. So if a person does 3 days a week of strength training, 2 days a week of aerobics, I would say do 4 days of strength training, maybe 1 day of aerobics. And so if strength training is up here and aerobics are up here, I would bust. I would bring the strength training up and lower even more the aerobic training. And I don't believe wholeheartedly that cardio is going to destroy your muscles or create a catabolic environment for your muscles. This happens in cases where you're like not lifting and you're doing all this cardio, and then of course your body's going to feed on its muscles. But to cover all your bases, I would reduce cardio for a little bit. And if you're an athlete, you can divide that up into seasons. So if you usually have a 3-month strength season, you can turn half your season into strength training, or 4 to 5 months into strength training. Of course, you'll always have little dashes of your cardiovascular stuff because you want to stay on top of that. But the priority should ultimately, over the course of time, when you reach that age, shift to more strength training. And what we mean by strength training is, relative strength, some absolute strength, and, functional hypertrophy and all these things too, right? Another thing that is important relative to that, and I think it all comes down to menopause and hormones, but protein should be increased as well, right? So I think it's important that you're getting all your essential amino acids. I think it's important that you have protein spaced equally throughout the day. So if you're, if you weigh 100, I'm not sure what you weigh now, Maria, but if you weigh let's say you weigh 125 pounds and you're currently taking in 120 grams of protein, well, you're a lifter, you're an athlete, you're going to lift even more. I would maybe bump up that protein to like 145 or 150 per day. Just again, to cover your bases, make sure that protein synthesis is continuously turning over and that your body isn't going to cannibalize itself, for lack of a term. You need to have protein turning over so that muscles are protected, that they're in a state of repair when they need to be, and that you're in a building state rather than a being broken down state. So really, things don't change that much. You just have to emphasize and change the dials a little bit. So strength training goes up, protein goes up, cardiovascular and endurance work is going to go down a little bit. What else to say about that? Aside from menopause and that consideration, but when a person gets like older, let's say like above 60 years old, you'll actually see training as a relative principle. You'll see training start to go back to the principles of somebody who's a beginner. So what are the principles of someone who's a beginner? Well, they're going to be doing more repetitions, more sets, reps, basically higher volume, a higher concentration of work per training session. So volume will be a little bit lighter. Wow, guys, sorry, I'm really tired. Volume will be a little bit higher. Frequency will be a little bit higher. Rest times will be a little bit reduced. Basically, because power is going to reduce a little bit, strength training in terms of kind of slower lifts is going to be prioritized as well. So when you have a very young beginner or an older experienced person, you're actually going to kind of become more and more similar as that goes on. So when you have a high training age, but you're not a little bit, but let's just call it what it is. When you have a higher training age, but you're older, you're actually going to look, not physically, but your training program is going to replicate more of what you'd see in a younger person with a younger training age. Okay, so basically it means higher volume. Why? Like I said, there'll be a loss of strength and application of power. So what do we know? If somebody can't express power, if somebody can't express higher levels of strength, then it only makes sense to do more repetitions to develop that strength, but to actually get a response, the proper dose response. To make that very clear, when you have somebody who's never lifted weights before, you're not going to give them a set of 3, right? What's that going to do for them? They don't have strength, they don't have power or an ability to make 3 reps actually do something for them. So therefore, that person should be doing 12 repetitions. That'll do something for them. So it actually gets a little bit similar as the person gets older. So just to summarize that, look, we're talking about an athlete, talking about somebody, let's just say who is within menopause, somebody who still wants to train as an athlete. Well, like I said, strength training is going to go up to protect against the ceasing of the hormone estrogen mainly, but there's obviously a lot of other stuff involved. Protein would probably increase, and training volume would probably increase. And cardiovascular training would probably decrease a little bit, at least as far as the training season and where you're at in that season. So I do hope that helps. Maria, if you have anything more specific you want answered, let me know. Let me see, since I'm on a flow and the phone hasn't died yet, I'll see if I can't answer a couple more questions. Okay. Maria, so how effective is air compression technology in recovery? Look, I try not to comment on anything that I have not used, and I have not ever used that. And honestly, I think the more simpler or more simple, the simpler something is, the better. And for the normal person, getting sleep, staying hydrated, having protein and vegetables, and getting sun. Those are the best recovery practices known to man. But when you have somebody who is an athlete who needs to get across the finish line with a result, a person has every right to throw the kitchen sink at themselves in terms of what can you do to leverage any of the tools that you have to improve the result. So, as an athlete, I would say, hey, if you try that and it works, do it up. But I don't know. I'm a little skeptical of the technology stuff, things that you have to plug in, but what do I know? I don't really know the answer to that question. I just think the human body has everything it needs within itself to facilitate proper recovery. And basically that means sleep and blood flow. That is my belief. And the farthest I go with recovery stuff is, soft tissue work. If you can afford to go see somebody to help break up adhesion, scar tissue, that's fantastic. I do believe in that. There's definitely science out there about foam rolling and self-administered, myofascial release as recovery, and to improve mobility. I do think that helps to an extent. So, but do I know anything about normatic or air compression tech for recovery? I don't, and I'm not qualified to give a definitive answer on that. But I don't think it would make or break your training. But dude, try it all and get back to us. Let us know if it's the latest breakthrough in athletic recovery. I'd be interested to know that. Okay, another thing: eating well on the road. This one's quite simple, and I send this as almost a canned response to anybody who has problems with road tripping. And there is no super convenient way to do it, but it's I wrote an article about it. I want to see if I can find it real quick. My road trip survival guide. I'm just going to read basically what this looks like. So in sort of a facetious sense, I listed it out into like really silly steps. But step one, get a cooler. So you got to invest. Anything that has to do with making things better for yourself is going to involve investing. So you have to you have to invest in a cooler, but you can also get one of those really cheap styrofoam ones. They work fine. Or get a really expensive Yeti. Get a cooler. Step two, shop for convenient foods. We'll get back to that in a moment. Step three, pack the cooler with ice. Like, duh. Step four, pack your cooler with kick-ass food. Also, duh. Step five, when hungry, pick one thing from each section below and enjoy. What a jerk. So in terms of selecting foods that you should be eating when you're on the road, you want to think about your regular meals and think about how I teach you what a plate should look like, right? So we should have somewhere between 1 and 2 palmfuls of protein. We should have 1 to 2 fists worth of vegetables. We should have 1 to 2, and obviously there's variations of this, thumb-sized portions of fat, and a cupped handful of carbs, right, for most people. So you just have to get, things that resemble those nutrients, and you're going to have to kind of pick and, grab and go. So, you can actually eat really well from a gas station, from a Quick Check or something sponsored. For example, protein. Get yourself some grass-fed beef jerky, hard-boiled eggs. You can get some of those really nice, fancy Applegate Farms, deli meats. You can get Epic bars. You can get protein bars. You could get cottage cheese. You could get yogurt, little single-serving packs. You can get single-serving packs of protein powder. All these things are really, really easy. And you can throw those in the cooler and they will be good. Sources of fat that are relatively convenient. You can get nut butter. You can also get those in like those single serving packs. Remember to use those sparingly because fat has a lot of calories in it. You can get mixed nuts. I suggest to reduce the chance of overeating it, I would get nuts that are unsalted, right? Because when it has the salt, you want to eat that, right? So try to go with no salt and get them raw if you can. Also seeds, but same thing. Keep them raw, lightly salted. Remember, these are portions of fat, thumb-sized. And then, of course, hard-boiled egg also fits into the fat source. Let's see. So I think fat for people can be a little bit difficult, but those options are really easy. It's not like you need to bring, olive oil with you, right? So there's plenty of things for fat that I just mentioned. And then carbs, of course. You could get something like a Larabar or one of those Kind bars. Those ones are like really carb heavy, sugary, which isn't the worst thing, but, and they're convenient. And then, of course, things like apples, baby carrots, celery. These are veggies. Blueberries, strawberries, blackberries. Basically fruits, I would say. Fruits are the best, right, for your carbs when you're on the road. Super, super convenient. And what you need to do is, whenever it's like time for a meal, as it were, you open your container, and if you're really cool, you'll separate, your partition your cooler into the 3 sections of food that you need: the protein, fat, and carb. I'm gonna look into my cooler. Let's say I open my cooler up. Okay, I need a protein. I'm gonna grab, a couple pieces of organic sliced turkey. Then I'm also going to have 1 nut butter pack. So I got turkey, that's my protein. I got a nut butter pack, that's my fat. What am I going to have for my carbs? Well, I'm going to eat an apple. And I'm going to chew it thoroughly. I'm going to slow it down, and I'm going to enjoy every bite. And that's going to be really delicious, and it's going to provide a very savory meal. That, as opposed to, I don't know, getting a Snickers bar. What do people eat on the road? I don't really know. A bag of chips. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. Don't go to fast food. You don't have to do that. And I'm telling you, when people travel and they feel like shit, a lot of it is because the nutrition just goes directly out the window, particularly if you've been doing really well and then all of a sudden you're doing fast food and stuff. You don't have to do that. Get that situated. Sorry, I have something in my eye, you guys. I'm dying over here. Get that cooler situated. I promise you, you will be so proud of yourself, and it's worth the effort. And everybody will be like, oh, dude, thanks for this cooler. This is really cool, man. You got all these snacks for us. Well, the snacks aren't for them. It's for you. You do this for yourself. Just kidding. You'll do it for your family too. But yeah, it takes a little bit of effort. It's an additional step to all the shit you got to do when you are traveling, but you can handle it. Just like everything else. It's common sense, and it's an effort, which is difficult for people. Putting in effort and using common sense. Those things are tough. I'm just playing. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have all my shit packed and ready to go, on the drive to Vermont. So if anybody needs any clarification with that, please just comment below on this video, and I'll give you more insight, more help. Let's see. I have time for about 1 more question. Is it ever necessary to use weightlifting accessories such as straps, belts, etc.? So this kind of this goes back to what I was originally answering, that question that Maria had about changing training based upon age and so on. Again, it's individual. You do want to leverage tools to help you get a better result. So one thing that I can think of off the top of my head is using lifting straps for something like a deadlift can be very beneficial. Why? Well, if you're limited by your grip, you got to do more grip work, right? That's a given. But sometimes, no matter how strong your grip is, it could limit your ability to do multiple reps of heavy weight. So using straps to not have to eliminate the grip problem, like, look, maybe you don't want to train your grip today, or maybe you are somebody who does a lot with their hands and their wrists and their forearms, and you don't want to tax that too much by doing deadlifts. Well, use straps, because you're still focusing mainly on your legs. You're taking out the variable of grip, and therefore you're leveraging a tool to get a better result. Perfectly fine. I also think, something like wrist wraps can be helpful. They kind of cushion the extension of the wrist, and some people have, funky wrist pain when they do too many push-ups or overhead squats and stuff. Now, I should be clear, this is just like supplements. If you have pain and you're trying to reduce pain by using one of these things, for example, a weightlifting belt, I would say that that's going down a path of dependency on a tool that generally, doesn't need to be used for that purpose. So what I would call these, what did you call them? Accessories. What I would call accessories are the same thing as supplements. Everything else needs to be in order. You've got good mobility, you've got good strength, and you are and you're training consistently. And you decide, hey, I want to leverage, I keep using that word, it's the word of the day. I want to leverage some tools to increase my performance. Same thing as a supplement. If your diet is really good, and then you start thinking, hey, you know what? I want to add to my diet and not try to replace something or to go a short way around. So then we call that supplementation. Like if you're a really good, if you're really compliant and you do everything as consistent as possible, and then you start taking creatine, fantastic. Like that's a great supplement to use. But if you're still, eating fast food, you're not really training, and you're just, taking creatine, this doesn't really make sense. And so if you have, back pain and you sit in an office chair all day, and then you're like, all right, let me whip out my weight belt and do my, my snatches, like it's just not congruent. So yeah, they're necessary if you think they're necessary, but you just have to consider the reason why, and that's it. And Rebecca, you asked about weightlifting shoes. Like, bro, weightlifting shoes are awesome. They're life changing. They change the game. You'll never want to do a squat without weightlifting shoes on ever again. So experiment with that stuff. Have fun. You could do a week where you use your accessories, do a week where you don't use your accessories. I used to lift in knee sleeves every time I did, and I would put knee sleeves on to bench press. But I got too dependent on it. So it was like, I forget what a full depth squat feels like with my knee at 100% flexion. So you don't want to just be overly dependent on that. I mean, at one point I did like, I was doing, like a cyclical, do a couple snatches, go out and run. I was running in my fucking lifters, dude. Like, this is unacceptable. Oh boy. Okay. So that's pretty it for now. That's pretty much it for now. Good grief, you guys. I gotta get going. I love you all. Thank you for the questions. Can't wait to see you all next week at the live Q&A. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled program. All right. Peace.